capitalize on all these different points and make sure your calorie deficit isn't too steep, your training stays on point, blah blah blah, you will, you know, minimize the muscle loss. So don't worry about this too much. What's going on, guys? It's Jacob, Sunday Lifters. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be answering one of the questions that is probably the most common question asked of somebody who has sort of successfully gone for a season of bulking at the gym or just putting on muscle. They've got the diet somewhat dialed in, or at least hitting their macros in terms of the protein and enough carbs for training. They've obviously got the grasp of basic hypertrophy training because they've got some results. And now it's coming up to probably more than likely the summer or a holiday or something along them lines, photo shoot maybe, depending on who you are. And now it's time to do your first proper cut. Question you're probably asking at that point is, what's the most effective way I can lose fat whilst also minimizing the amount of muscle that I lose during that sort of cutting process? I'm going to answer that question very simply. The most effective way to lose fat is, of course, just being in a calorie deficit. There's no need to overcomplicate that. And the most effective way to hold on to your muscle during a cutting phase, I've boiled it down to 5 main points. We'll go into what those 5 main points are in a second. There's probably more than 5 that contribute. Obviously the human body is a very complex thing, but these 5 things are the most important ones in terms of determining how much muscle you'll lose on a cut. Now, if you are a natural, I'm reluctant to say that there is a way you can absolutely lose no muscle at all. However, you can really get it, almost to a point where you won't notice any muscle loss on your frame, especially because you're losing fat at the same time. You are going to look probably a little bit smaller than you are, but you're definitely going to look more muscular. At the very least, your muscles are going to look more defined because obviously there's not that fat layer, sitting over it. Now, if you are somebody who is not a natural, you're blasting, cruising, you're on TRT, whatever it may be to you. If you're not a natural, the normal rules do not apply to you. Obviously, for a natural person, the calorie deficit, the amount of fat they consume, the amount of sleep they get, there's loads of different things that will determine how much testosterone they have on a daily basis. Now, if you are administering your testosterone exogenously, you are having the same, or you should anyway, be having the same dose every single day, every 3 days, every 5 days, every week, however you're doing it. It should be a consistent dose. So if you're not a natural, obviously take everything said in this video with a pinch of salt. I wouldn't say it's worth tuning out. It's still, if you can do these 5 things or take note of these 5 things and address them during a cut, it's only going to benefit you. It's not you have to be natural or there's no point doing any of it. All of that being said, guys, let's now jump into those 5 things. But before we do, if you could drop this a like, a comment, and consider subscribing if you're not already. It does really help the channel grow and it is hugely appreciated. Determining factor number 1 is how much or how steep your calorie deficit is. Now, I'm not going to overcomplicate this, to be honest. If you're going anything lower than 200, 300 calorie deficits on a daily basis, I would say you're probably running the risk of losing some muscle. Although it's not what you want to hear, you want to be making sure your cut is long, a lengthy process. You want to be doing small deficits every day to lose the fat. If you start going super aggressive with it, you're going to have collateral damage, and that collateral is going to be muscle mass. Essentially, if you've left it too late and you do need to go into an aggressive cut to sort of get down to the body weight or body fat percentage that you want to, if you've left it too late, unfortunately there's not a lot you can do. If you're gonna go 500, 600, 800 calorie deficit every single day, you're gonna see muscle loss. There's nothing you can do about it. Determining factor number 2 is your training. So basically there's two ways to think about this. The reason I'm saying there's two ways you can go about this is because most people would say, and rightly so, if you can do it, your training shouldn't change whether you're on a bulk or a cut. It should be exactly the same. You should be trying to hit the same numbers, the same amount of reps. You should be not necessarily trying to increase your lifts, increase your volume or anything like that, but just trying to maintain what you were on before you start cutting. If you go into the sort of gym with the mindset that all your numbers are going to go down week by week, or even just, you know, every few weeks, it's probably more than likely that you're going to allow that to happen. If you go in sort of with the right mindset and trying to hit everything you were hitting before the cut, and maintain that muscle mass, then you're more than likely going to be able to do it. The second way to go about this, and I appreciate that when you're doing a cut, you have to do a lot of cardio, or, well, you don't have to do a lot of cardio. You could just, like I say, just do the 300 calorie deficit every day. But people tend to chuck in cardio. And with that cardio and life in general, your work, your social life, your partner, your marriage, whatever, it can be hard to do the same amount of training and go to train as much as you were before you were implementing cardio in as well. So the other option is you do minimum effective volume. A good ballpark for minimum effective volume of training to maintain muscle would be doing each body part once a week and trying to do at least 8 sets, I'd say. Still, if you can, operating in that optimal hypertrophy zone, which is sort of between 6 and 15 reps. If you can do that, that will also help you hold on to your muscle during your cut. Third factor is simply your chronological age. So this applies to both men and women. If you're a dude, however, it's obvious that younger guys are more than likely going to have higher testosterone than older guys. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rules. There are other contributing factors as well which apply to both sexes that make it slightly easier for younger people to burn more fat and maintain or hold on to muscle during a cut. Those factors will simply be things like sleep quality, energy levels, joint wear and tear, sort of overall training capacity, just lots of little different things that obviously are affected as we age, that will, like I say, make it harder for older people. However, if you are an older person and you're watching this, don't let that deter you, because again, if you sort of capitalize on all these different points and make sure your calorie deficit isn't too steep, your training stays on point, blah blah blah, you will, you know, minimize the muscle loss. So don't worry about this too much. And ultimately, unfortunately, guys, there's nothing you can do. We all age. Number 4 is your training age. Now, when I say training age, I just mean it's usually measured in years, how many years you've been training effectively. Now, the less time you've been training, the easier it's going to be to maintain your muscle when you're in a cut. The longer you've been training, the harder it's going to be. When you've been training for more years, it's harder to build muscle, and like I say, it's actually harder to even maintain it when you're in a calorie deficit, which is crazy. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but it's not. So, you know, if you're a newbie, there's even a chance, if you're a newbie, that you could be in a calorie deficit and actually gain muscle, which again is crazy. But I've said it before, and like, it's tongue-in-cheek obviously, but like, it kind of feels like it sometimes when you're a newbie to the gym and resistance training. It's like you can just fucking look at weights and you will grow. So if you're someone who's been training for many years, you need to, again, really try and capitalize on these things. Try and keep a small deficit. Make sure you're doing training as close to as possible the same as before you started your cut. If you're a newbie, you probably get away with not, you know, doing all of these things as well. As I'd probably say the main thing is, if your training stays on point and you're getting your protein in, you'll probably be okay. Drop this all over my top, man. Can't make it to the end of one video without doing something like that. Point number 5 is how much body fat you've got when you start your cut. The less body fat you've got, the more likely, again, your body's going to start eating into the muscle when you're sort of losing weight. If you've got, if you're someone who, let's say you're like a 220 pound person and your body fat percentage is like 24% body fat, you're probably going to find it quite easy to lose the fat whilst holding on to the muscle, again, if you're doing all of these types of things. And imagine at that sort of body fat percentage, it might be hard until you get into the sort of 15 or below for a dude, and maybe like 20 or below for a woman. You're probably not going to be seeing that much muscle anyway, so you probably wouldn't know unless you had like a body analyzer how much muscle you've held on to. You probably wouldn't be able to see, but again, you can use your lifts as a bit of a marker for this. If your lifts are staying consistent and you're not having to put the weights down, lower the reps, etc., the volume, that's probably a good indicator that you are holding on to your muscle. If you are at a lower body fat percentage, let's just say for instance you're at like 15% body fat and you want to get to 10, you've got to be a little bit more clinical about how you do this, and again, taking into account all these different points, you need to be on the ball with it, because your body, 15% isn't a super low body fat percentage. It's a healthy body fat percentage, and your body wants to be healthy ultimately. When you get to like sort of 10% and below, it's starting to get a little bit unhealthy. Some processes in the body aren't going to work as well. This is for men. If you were that low for a woman, that's potentially dangerous. You might stop having your period, things like that. Women probably don't really want to be going much lower than 15%, I would say, maybe 14. So yeah, be mindful of the amount of body fat you're starting your cut with. The higher, the better, really, the more reason to do a cut. If you're lower, you've just got to be a bit more careful with it. So there are other factors that will play into this, of course, like the amount of protein you're getting, macro split, that kind of thing. There's other auxiliary points that will affect the amount of muscle you hold on to. However, those 5 are probably the biggest ones, and if you just focused on them, like I say, you can pretty much go through a cutting phase without losing any muscle, or if you do, such a small amount you wouldn't even notice it. You've just got to be consistent, guys. You've just got to be patient, because you've got to do a slower cut. You've got to stay on the ball with your training, or at least get that minimum effective volume in, and you've got to be mindful of the factors like your training age, your chronological age, and just keep monitoring your process. If you can, do get a body analyzer. I'll link one down below, because that is going to tell you it's not 100% accurate, but it's good enough to use, man. It's going to tell you your weight, your body fat percentage, and your muscle mass, and you can keep an eye on those 3 metrics, almost doing it every day, and maybe taking a weekly average, because that'll give you probably the most accurate result. Tracking really helps with this sort of thing, so maybe consider doing that as well. That is all I'm going to cover on this video, guys. Hopefully you found this useful. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, and consider subscribing. You can follow me on all my socials. It's Sunday Lifters on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can email me at sundaylifters@gmail.com for workout plans and coaching. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you back here again very soon.